Hi everyone. Let's talk about Car Seat Headrest. Washington State band Car Seat Headrest, known for some of the most, well-liked indie rock in the 2010s. You have Teens of Denial, Twin Fantasy, whether it be the reworked version or the original, you cannot deny that Car Seat Headrest has been a very important and prolific name in the 2010s, making indie rock way bigger than it needed to be, in my opinion, but also making indie rock that was very emotional. I would also like to blame them for the resurgence of the genre and telling people that they can believe they could be the next Car Seat Headrest, they could be the next indie darlings, they can get all these best new musics and 5 stars and 10 out of 10s and A pluses from the critics. Yeah, I feel like indie rock nowadays has just been really boring, and I don't want to blame Car Seat Headrest entirely, but however, the albums that they have made up until this point have undeniably been very emotional, but also very well done, and production-wise, kinda lo-fi, but also maintaining to just a very emotional place for a listener. It can suck you into an hour-long experience, and you come out sobbing, realizing that everything Will Toledo has been saying is true. They got signed on to MATADOR Records in 2015 to release their Teens of Style album, 2016, Teens of Denial, and then that was their last album of new material. They reworked their 2011 album Twin Fantasy for a 2018 edition, so this is the first album from the band of new material since 2016. It's been 4 years, their longest break between albums. And from the lead singles leading up to this album, you can tell this was going to be a stylistic shift towards a more electronic sound. Given the track Can't Cool Me Down with these chords that are very simplistic, but I felt like the main problem with this song for me was that I felt like it didn't progress anywhere. We were then given the track Hollywood, which is questionable. I will admit, I love the of the song, but the vocals are just absolutely what? I believe they're delivered by drummer Andrew Katz, and it's kind of like mixing bleach and ammonia. They both have their benefits, but mixed together, they just don't create anything that works or anything that's healthy. They create something that's lethal. This song's lethal. And I gotta admit, none of the singles leading up to this album were impressing me. Not There Must Be More Than Blood, not Martin, not the other two I just mentioned. I was pretty much expecting to go into this album not liking it, and, this album has a lot of people divided. I think it will have a lot of Car Seat Headrest fans divided as well. And I'll be the first to say this, I haven't been very public about my opinions on Car Seat Headrest, but I'm not the hugest fan, I'm not a stan of them, but I do like their albums. Not all of them, but, of course the notable ones. I'm not gobbling up everything they're feeding me, and sometimes they can feed me stuff that feels just ridiculous. Their early material, to be specific, is very rough around the edges, but it's gonna be. It's a lo-fi indie rock album. What are you gonna expect? Again, I have to emphasize that I am not a stan of Car Seat Headrest. I haven't been the biggest fan of their work, but I do like their work. So when I tell you that for some reason I actually like this record, I hope you look at me and say, wow, unbiased opinion. Unbiased opinion. I don't know what about this album is so compelling to me. It kind of reminds me of Boarding House Reach by Jack White, where both artists are kind of taking their sound that they're known for and just kind of throwing it out the window, throwing it in the toilet and just flushing it away, and just completely alienating their fan base to create something that's just wild, eccentric, and very unorthodox. However, I would have to say that indie rock bands have kind of been known to kind of make their INDIETRONICA album, which almost all the time goes badly because it's either really boring, very monotonous, or it doesn't really do anything to add to the genre. However, Making a Door Less Open I would argue, is not boring, is bold, and does the sound justice. Okay, maybe not the justice that some people might want to hear in an INDIETRONICA album, but I am so happy this thing is not boring. Like, for me at least, this could have gone south quickly. Given the lead singles to this album, I was pretty much anticipating a record that wasn't indie rock, but I was also anticipating a record that was going to be at least somewhat memorable. And from one track to the next, yeah, these songs are memorable. But for me personally, it's all for the right reasons. I mean, there are a lot of weird synthesizers that are incorporated onto these tracks. There are a lot of unorthodox things that happen on this album, like the track Life Worth Missing, where you have these synths that are just being panned really quickly back and forth between left and right channel. And as this song progresses, you kind of get this triumphant vibe within this track. There's these really heavy drums that are incorporated into the track. You have Will Toledo kind of doing his very boyish vocal delivery. And throughout this record, the vocals are not kind of held back by a mix, making them not the forefront to a song. You are going to be hearing Will Toledo's vocals pretty much at the forefront of all of these songs. Now back to this track. There is a triumphant vibe with this track, but there's also one that's somber as well. And that especially comes through during the latter portion of this track. You also have probably one of the weirdest tracks on here, Him, which features these looped vocal snippets that kind of introduce us to the track, and then you have these really weird and just kooky off-the-wall synthesizers that are just playing back and forth, drum patterns that are very weird and just make this song more eccentric. But like, the subtle genius of this song is that everything's really disconnected at the front, but then once you progress into the track, it starts to kind of make sense. For example, the chorus of this track in particular has this drum and bass vibe that still plays off of what was being done at the beginning of the track, but you just have these extra kicks and snares and hi-hats. And the synthesizers that were initially playing at the beginning are now in the back, and you have these new synthesizers that are a little less weird. Again, this song is really wild and really off the deep end for Will Toledo, but a lot of these songs are, and I kind of like that quality about this album. For example, the track Weightlifter's that opens this album up starts off with these very eerie synthesizers that build into the song. And then you get some drum patterns that are incorporated, and then again we have Will singing. You get guitars that come into the fold as well, and the more the song progresses, the more impressed that I get. It's like these weird and kooky ideas just fuse together in like the most obvious of ways, and you're like, oh, that's smart. Another example of this happening is the track Deadlines, the second version, Thoughtful, which features these very, very simple drum patterns in 4, and then you get more kooky synthesizers that are coming to the fold. And then you get in the background other synthesizers. Well, yeah, as the song progresses, it just gets wild and eccentric and almost insane. When Will Toledo comes into the mix on this song, the instrumentation kind of bows out a little bit to give him more room to breathe. But then they quickly come back into the fold, and then they almost make for a drop that happens in this song. It is so weird. But when this happens, it totally reminds me of something that I would listen to when I was younger in my EDM phase. Hollywood in the track listing, you know, the more I listen to the song, the more I like it. I don't know, there's just something about this instrumental that is just way too good for it to be ignored. And I've kind of grown to appreciate Andrew's vocal performance on this track. It is wild, it is weird, it is very eccentric, but the way he's, I guess, singing and the way the lyrics kind of come into play on these tracks, it almost makes sense. This song also has like an LCD sound system vibe to it. Like, this is something I imagine James Murphy would do. You know, Hollywood makes me wanna puke. Kind of reminds me of North American Scum in some way, or something off their debut album. But this track in particular, the guitars, again, they're loud, they're buzzing in the mix, and God, they're so good though. Like, I wanted to like this song initially, and now that I really, I guess, get past the vocals of this track, it's just a really good song. Martin is probably a moment on this record where I could see it fit into another Car Seat Headrest album, but that's even a stretch for me to say because this is a very fast-paced song. That horn solo at the end of the track is really good though, I'm not gonna deny. The track Famous is also another moment on this record that I just really admire because the chorus of this track in particular is pretty loud, pretty rambunctious. Again, a lot of weird effects happen during this song, but it's just too kooky not to, I guess, love. And the track There Must Be More Than Blood is one of the slower moments on this album. It's almost like a breather moment in some way, even though there's still a lot going on in this track. And it also has like this psychedelic post-rock flair to it as well. I guess there were a few songs on this record that I weren't impressed by, like maybe the portion of Deadline Hostile that I just wasn't a fan of, or even the track Can't Cool Me Down. Also, What's With You Lately? Kind of forgettable for me, honestly. Easily the weakest song on here because it's just a minute of some guitar and some vocals, and that's really it. And as a whole, this record does not really come together stylistically. It is very all over the place, very eccentric, very eclectic. And maybe the lyrics on this record could be written a little bit better, but this album, I don't know, it's just taking the sounds of their older material and just kind of throwing it away and forgetting about it mostly, and making something that is just really new and bold and adventurous, ambitious as well in some way. I mean, look, this is one of their shortest albums to date, so I'm not going to say it's entirely ambitious, but it is a record that I look at with a lot of love because I really do like this album. It's quirky, it's fun to listen to, it's weird. I feel like I've said that word a million times in this review, but I feel like that is the best way to describe it. And there are a few things this album is and is not. One, this album is eccentric, it's eclectic, it's all over the place, but it's not boring. It's also an album that's going to divide a lot of people, and I am totally here for it. But I don't see this album being the direction Car Seat Headrest wants to go in, personally. I see this album kind of like just them toying around with something and just saying, fuck it, you know what? We're just gonna do us. We're just gonna do me. And you know what? I'm all for it. This record's enjoyable. I like the shit out of this album. And again, there are moments where I'm just not as head over heels as I am for other tracks, but just a lot of the songs on this record incorporate some of the weirdest ideas that would never happen on other Car Seat Headrest albums. Buzzing synthesizers, really weird drum timbres, and odd effects that happen a lot. It's just too kooky for me not to love. Again, I don't see Car Seat Headrest going in this direction, but if they were, I would love for them to refine their sound and make a more consistent album next time around with better lyricism as well. But this album, as of now, for me it's an A-. I gotta be honest. It's just enjoyable to listen to. It's fun. However, I am curious to know what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below. Let me know what albums you want me to review next, and that is it. Leave a like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember, this is only my opinion because music is subjective.